They say a single drop of blood can save a life, but nobody ever tells you what happens when that life starts changing yours. The smell of antiseptic clung to my clothes the way exhaustion clung to my bones. It was a little after 7 on a rainy Thursday evening, and I was standing inside the blood donation center I'd visited almost every month for the past 5 years. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. Outside, water streaked down the windows in silver lines. Inside, everything felt familiar. The same check-in desk. The same faded posters about saving lives. The same elderly volunteer who always greeted me with a smile and called me sweetheart, even though I was 29 years old. My name is Maya Johnson, and if you had asked me back then why I kept donating blood so often, I would have given you a simple answer. Because somebody needed it. Growing up on the south side of Chicago, my mother taught me that kindness wasn't measured by how much money you had. It was measured by what you gave when nobody was watching. Sometimes that meant helping a neighbor carry groceries. Sometimes it meant staying late to help a struggling coworker. And sometimes it meant sitting in a reclining chair for an hour while a machine quietly collected a part of you that could help someone else survive another day. I never thought much about where it went afterward. Most donors didn't. We showed up, rolled up our sleeves, got a cookie and a juice box and went home. Life moved on. At least that's what I believed. A nurse named Rebecca approached with her tablet and warm smile. "Back again, Maya?" she asked. "You know me," I said. "Hard to get rid of." She laughed. "Trust me, there are people very grateful for that." Something about the way she said it caught my attention. Not because it sounded strange. Because it sounded personal. I'd heard variations of that sentence for years. Yet lately it felt like the staff were looking at me differently. Like they knew something I didn't. While she checked my vitals, I noticed an older physician standing near the hallway. He was watching me. Not in a creepy way. More like he was studying a photograph that carried a memory. When our eyes met, he smiled politely and nodded before disappearing through a secure door marked authorized personnel only. I frowned. Who was that? Rebecca glanced over her shoulder. Dr. Sullivan. Does he work here? Sometimes. Her answer was oddly vague. Before I could ask another question, she directed me toward the donation chair. The procedure itself was routine. I leaned back, closed my eyes, listened to the rain tapping against the glass. My mind wandered to overdue bills waiting on my kitchen counter. To the second job I picked up tutoring elementary school students on weekends. To the fact that my 10-year-old Honda desperately needed new brakes. Normal worries. Ordinary problems. The kind of life nobody makes movies about. 45 minutes later I was finished. Rebecca handed me a bottle of water and a package of crackers. "Take it easy tonight," she said. "Always do." But as I headed toward the exit, a voice stopped me. "Miss Johnson." I turned. Dr. Sullivan stood a few feet away. Up close he looked older than I'd expected. Mid-60s maybe. Silver hair. Kind eyes hidden behind wireframe glasses. For a moment he simply looked at me. Then something emotional flickered across his face. Relief. Gratitude. Maybe both. "Thank you," he said quietly. I smiled. "For donating?" He nodded. "For never missing a month." I laughed softly. "Someone has to do it." The doctor held my gaze for a second longer than normal. "Yes," he said. "Someone does." Then he looked away. Almost like he'd nearly said too much. Rain greeted me the moment I stepped outside. I opened my umbrella and started toward the parking lot. Behind me, through the large glass windows of the center, I noticed Dr. Sullivan still standing there, watching me leave. The expression on his face wasn't professional. It wasn't casual. It looked more like a man protecting a secret. A secret somehow connected to me. At the time I brushed it off and drove home. I didn't know that less than 20 miles away, inside a private hospital wing hidden from the public, a young boy was fighting for another tomorrow. And I certainly didn't know that for 5 years every drop of blood I donated had been helping keep him alive. The next morning started like every other Friday. My alarm went off at 6. The coffee tasted terrible. The train was crowded. By 8 o'clock, I was helping third graders practice reading comprehension at a community learning center on the west side of Chicago. Ordinary. Predictable. Safe. I like safe. Safe paid the bills. Safe helped me sleep at night. What I did not know was that across the country, inside a private medical facility hidden behind layers of security and discretion, a 10-year-old boy named Haruto Takahashi was struggling again. The room was quiet except for the steady rhythm of monitors and the soft hum of filtered air moving through hidden vents. Rain tapped gently against the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Haruto sat propped up in bed, his small frame swallowed by oversized blankets. His skin looked pale beneath the morning light. A nurse adjusted his intravenous line before stepping back. Nobody spoke. Nobody wanted to say what everyone was thinking. The treatment was becoming less effective. The lead physician studied a tablet filled with charts and laboratory reports. Numbers, percentages, trends. Data never lied. And the data worried him. After several long moments, he left the room and entered a private conference area where 3 specialists waited. Their expressions told him everything. How bad? One asked quietly. The physician exhaled. Worse than last month. Silence followed. Finally, another doctor glanced toward the secured hallway. Does his father know? Before anyone could answer, the conference room door opened. Every person inside immediately stood. Kenji Takahashi entered without a word. He wore a charcoal suit that looked perfectly tailored despite the early hour. His expression revealed nothing. Calm, controlled, precise. The kind of composure built over decades. Yet the doctors noticed the exhaustion around his eyes. He had not been sleeping much. Fathers rarely did when their children were suffering. Kenji looked at each person in the room before focusing on the reports spread across the table. Tell me. Nobody rushed to answer. Eventually the lead physician cleared his throat. His condition remains stable for now. Kenji's eyes narrowed slightly. That was not my question. The physician swallowed. The donor supply remains critical. The room grew still. Kenji lowered his gaze to the report. One name appeared repeatedly throughout years of records. Maya Johnson. The same name. Month after month. Year after year. Consistent. Reliable. Unbroken. She donated again yesterday, the physician said carefully. Without interruption. Kenji stared at the name. Something about it unsettled him. Not because it was unfamiliar. Because it represented a debt he could never repay. For 5 years, a stranger had been helping keep his son alive. 5 years. Hundreds of ordinary decisions made by someone who never knew the impact of her actions. Most people disappeared after one donation. Some returned once or twice. Very few remained committed for years. Yet she always came back. What do we know about her? Kenji asked. The room exchanged uncertain looks. A coordinator opened a file. Not much. 29 years old. Lives in Chicago. Works multiple jobs. No criminal record. No requests for compensation. Kenji listened quietly. The coordinator continued. Every time we attempted to send additional recognition through approved channels, she declined. For the first time, something flickered across Kenji's face. Curiosity. Genuine curiosity. He closed the folder and stood. Find out everything. The doctors exchanged glances. Everything, one repeated. Kenji looked through the glass wall toward his son's room. Haruto was staring out at the rain alone. A person does not save my child for 5 years and remain a stranger forever. 3 days passed before I noticed anything unusual. My life remained exactly what it had always been. Early mornings. Long hours. Too much coffee. Not enough sleep. On Monday afternoon, I was helping a 9-year-old student sound out difficult vocabulary words when my phone vibrated inside my purse. I ignored it. An hour later it buzzed again. Then again. By the time my shift ended, I had 6 missed calls from an unknown number. I almost deleted them without listening to the voicemail. Almost. Something made me stop. The message was brief. Professional. Calm. A woman introduced herself as Emily Chan from a private medical foundation. She explained that someone wished to speak with me regarding my long history of charitable blood donations. No details. No explanation. Just a request to return the call. I frowned as I listened. Foundations did not usually call people like me. Wealthy donors maybe. Corporate sponsors definitely. Elementary school tutors with an aging Honda and student loans? Not so much. By the time I reached my apartment, I had convinced myself it was probably a fundraising campaign. The next morning, another call arrived. Then an email. Then a letter delivered by overnight courier. That got my attention. Nobody spent that kind of money just to ask for donations. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, a team of investigators continued compiling information about me. Kenji Takahashi sat alone in a quiet office overlooking the city skyline. The report in front of him had grown thicker every day. Employment history, volunteer work, education records, community references. He turned another page, then another. The deeper he looked, the more confused he became. Most people wanted something: recognition, money, influence, opportunity. Maya Johnson appeared to want none of those things. One page described how I spent Saturdays tutoring children whose families could not afford private lessons. Another described volunteer work at a local food pantry. Another mentioned how I routinely declined reimbursement, offers for transportation, expenses connected to charity events. Kenji leaned back in his chair. The silence inside the room felt heavy. His chief advisor stood nearby. "Anything unusual?" the advisor asked. Kenji studied the file again. "Yes." The advisor waited. "She is exactly who everyone says she is." The answer surprised them both. Powerful men often expected hidden motives because they spent their lives surrounded by them. Yet every report led to the same conclusion. Maya Johnson was simply kind. Not perfect. Not extraordinary. Just consistently kind. Back in Chicago, I finally returned the call. Emily answered immediately, almost as if she had been waiting. "Miss Johnson," she said warmly, "thank you for calling back. Can someone tell me what this is about?" I asked. A brief pause followed. "There is an individual who wishes to express gratitude for your years of generosity." I laughed softly. "That seems a little dramatic." Emily did not laugh. "Perhaps. But some lives have been changed because of your commitment." Her words brought me back to Dr. Sullivan standing near the donation center window. The strange look on his face. The way he thanked me for never missing a month. Suddenly, none of it felt random anymore. "Who is this person?" I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. "That conversation is better had in person." I stared out my apartment window at the evening traffic below. Something inside me shifted. Curiosity. Unease. Maybe both. "And if I say no?" Emily's voice remained gentle. "Then your decision will be respected." I should have declined. I should have hung up and returned to my ordinary life. Instead, I found myself asking the question that changed everything. Where do I need to go? 2 days later, I found myself standing inside the departure terminal at O'Hare International Airport holding a ticket I never would have purchased on my own. The foundation had arranged everything. The flight, the hotel, the transportation. Every detail had been handled before I even agreed to go. That alone should have made me uncomfortable. Instead, it made me curious. During the flight, I stared out the window as clouds drifted beneath the aircraft like endless fields of white. My mind kept returning to the same question. Why me? I was not a doctor. I was not a celebrity. I was not wealthy or influential. I was just someone who donated blood. By late afternoon, a black sedan met me outside the airport. The driver introduced himself politely and loaded my suitcase into the trunk. The city unfolded outside the window as we drove. Glass towers, expensive storefronts, streets cleaner than any neighborhood I had ever lived in. Everything felt polished, controlled, important. 40 minutes later, we arrived at a private medical complex, unlike any hospital I had ever seen. There were no crowded waiting rooms, no lines, no noise. The lobby looked more like a luxury hotel than a healthcare facility. Marble floors reflected warm light from elegant fixtures overhead. A woman in a navy suit approached immediately. "Miss Johnson," she asked. "I am Emily Chun." I recognized her voice from the phone calls. She smiled warmly and shook my hand. "Thank you for coming." "I am still trying to figure out why I am here," I admitted. Emily glanced toward a private elevator. "You are about to find out." The ride upward felt strangely quiet. My heartbeat seemed louder with every passing floor. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped into a private wing where everything became even more surreal. Security personnel stood discreetly near hallways. Nurses moved quietly between rooms. The atmosphere felt serious without being tense, important without being chaotic. Emily guided me toward a set of large windows overlooking a patient room. "Before we explain anything," she said softly, "there is someone we would like you to meet." I followed her gaze. A young boy sat near the window inside the room, maybe 10 years old. Dark hair, thin frame. A book rested open in his lap, though he did not appear to be reading it. He was staring at the rain outside. Something about him immediately pulled at my heart. He looked lonely. Not sad exactly, just alone, as if he had spent a long time waiting for something, or someone. The boy suddenly turned his head. His eyes found mine through the glass. Everything seemed to stop. He stood so quickly that his book slipped onto the floor. Then he walked toward the door. A nurse tried to say something. He ignored her. Seconds later, the door opened. The boy stepped into the hallway and looked directly at me. Neither of us spoke. He simply stared. Then, to my complete surprise, a smile spread across his face. Not a polite smile. Not a cautious one. The kind of smile people wear when they finally find something they thought they might never see. Behind me, I heard a deep voice speak for the first time. "Haruto." I turned. A tall man stood at the far end of the hallway. Perfectly tailored suit. Calm expression. Eyes that missed nothing. The moment our gazes met, I knew this was the person behind everything. And somehow I also knew my ordinary life had just changed forever. For a few seconds nobody moved. Haruto stood in the middle of the hallway looking at me as if he already knew me. I looked back just as confused. Children usually needed time to warm up to strangers, especially in hospitals, especially in situations like this. But there was no hesitation in his eyes, only recognition, the kind that made no sense. "Hello," I said softly. Haruto smiled wider. "You came." The words caught me off guard. I glanced at Emily. She looked emotional. The nurses looked emotional. Even the doctor standing near the doorway seemed relieved. Meanwhile, I had no idea what was happening. "Of course I came," I answered carefully. "You invited me." Haruto shook his head. "No. You have been coming for years." A strange silence followed. My heart skipped. Before I could ask what he meant, the tall man from the end of the hallway approached. His movements were calm and deliberate. Every person nearby seemed to become more alert the closer he came. Yet when he stopped beside Haruto, his expression softened almost imperceptibly. "My name is Kenji Takahashi," he said. His voice was deep and controlled. "Thank you for accepting our invitation." I nodded. "I am Maya." "I know." Something about the way he said it made me remember all those reports he had probably collected about me. Strangely, I was not angry, just curious. Haruto reached for my hand before anyone could continue the conversation. His fingers were small and warm. "Come see my room." The request sounded so normal that I found myself smiling. "All right." Inside the room, rain continued tapping against the massive windows overlooking the city. Haruto sat on the edge of his bed while I took a nearby chair. Kenji remained standing near the window, watching, listening, waiting. Finally, Dr. Sullivan entered. Seeing him there made everything click. The donation center. The strange gratitude. The secret of conversations. He smiled gently. "I suppose you deserve an explanation." I laughed nervously. "That would be nice." The doctor sat across from me and folded his hands. 5 years ago, Haruto developed a rare medical condition. His treatment required a very specific blood type, one that is exceptionally difficult to find. My smile faded. "Okay." We searched everywhere. He paused. "And then we found a donor." Something tightened in my chest. Dr. Sullivan continued. "That donor was you." I blinked. Once. Twice. Certain I had misunderstood. "Me." He nodded. "Every month you donated. Every month your blood helped support treatments that allowed Haruto to keep fighting." I stared at him, then at Haruto, then back again. The room suddenly felt unreal. 5 years. 5 entire years. Nobody told me. My voice sounded smaller than I intended. We could not, the doctor said softly. Privacy laws protected everyone involved. Haruto slid off the bed and walked closer. But I knew someone was helping me. His eyes lifted to mine. I asked about you every year. The room grew quiet again. I looked at the little boy standing in front of me. This child I had never met. This child whose life had somehow been connected to mine all along. And for the first time I understood why Dr. Sullivan had thanked me so many times. What I had given away every month had never disappeared. It had become someone else's tomorrow. The rest of that afternoon passed in a blur. Part of me wanted to ask 100 questions. Another part could not stop looking at Haruto. He seemed so normal. A little boy who liked books. A little boy who smiled too easily. A little boy who somehow carried 5 years of my unseen kindness inside him. We spent hours talking about simple things. His favorite movies. His favorite foods. The fact that he hated math but loved history. At one point he proudly showed me a collection of postcards he kept beside his bed. Every card came from a different city. Every card represented a place he hoped to visit someday. I listened as he described each destination with the excitement only children possess. For a while I forgot where I was. I forgot the private hospital. I forgot the mysterious invitation. I forgot the powerful man standing quietly near the windows. Then Haruto suddenly looked at me and asked a question that stole the air from my lungs. Will you come back? The room became very still. I glanced toward Kenji. His expression revealed nothing. Yet somehow I sensed he was paying attention to every word. I live in Chicago, I answered gently. That is pretty far away. Haruto lowered his eyes. Oh, the disappointment in that single syllable hurt more than I expected. But that does not mean I cannot visit, I added quickly. His head lifted immediately. Hope returned to his face so fast it almost made me laugh. Really? Really? Haruto grinned. Across the room, I noticed something unusual. The tension in Kenji's shoulders eased slightly. Just slightly. As if he had been holding his breath. Later that evening, Emily escorted me toward a private dining area prepared for guests. The hallways were quieter now. Most of the staff had gone home. Rain still tapped softly against the windows. He likes you, Emily said. I like him too. She smiled. You have no idea how important that is. Before I could ask what she meant, Kenji appeared from a nearby corridor. Emily excused herself and disappeared, leaving us alone. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then Kenji gestured toward the city lights beyond the glass wall. Thank you. I laughed softly. You already thanked me. Not enough. His answer was immediate. Honest. Unexpected. I studied him more carefully. Until now I had mostly seen the powerful businessman everyone seemed to respect. Tonight I saw something else. A father. A tired father who had spent years watching his son fight through difficult days. You do not owe me anything, I said quietly. Kenji looked away toward the skyline. That is where we disagree. His voice carried no arrogance. No authority. Only certainty. Every morning I wake up and my son is still here. He paused. That is because of people like you. The words settled heavily between us. For the first time I understood something important. This was never about money. It was never about influence. It was about gratitude. Real gratitude. The kind that cannot be measured. The kind that changes people. And standing there beneath the city lights, I realized my life and Haruto's life had become connected. Long before either of us knew the other's name. The next morning, I expected everything to feel different. Instead, the world carried on exactly as before. Nurses moved through hallways. Doctors reviewed charts. Rain gave way to sunlight beyond the tall windows. Yet something inside me had changed. After breakfast, I found Haruto sitting in a recreation room assembling a complicated model airplane. Pieces were spread across a large table. His concentration was absolute. Need help? I asked. He looked up and smiled. You can hold the wings. For the next hour we worked side by side. We talked about school, books, music, the kinds of conversations that happen naturally when people stop trying so hard. At one point, Haruto laughed so hard at one of my stories that he nearly dropped the airplane. A nurse passing through the room stopped and stared. What? Haruto asked. The nurse smiled. Nothing. But her expression suggested otherwise. Later I learned why. According to the staff, Haruto had not laughed that freely in months. The realization stayed with me all afternoon. Sometimes helping someone had nothing to do with medicine. Sometimes people simply needed connection. Around 3 o'clock, I stepped outside onto a private terrace overlooking the city. Fresh air felt good after so many hours indoors. The skyline stretched across the horizon beneath a clear blue sky. For a few peaceful minutes I stood alone. Then I noticed 2 security personnel speaking quietly near the entrance. The moment they saw me, the conversation stopped. They exchanged a look before walking away. It was subtle, almost invisible, but I noticed. A strange feeling settled into my stomach. Not fear exactly, more like awareness. Something was happening around me that I did not fully understand. That evening I finally asked Emily, "Why does everyone keep watching me?" She hesitated. Just long enough for me to know the answer mattered. Because people care about Haruto. That does not explain the security. Emily sighed softly. When someone becomes important to someone powerful, attention follows. The answer raised more questions than it solved. Before I could press further, my phone rang. It was my supervisor in Chicago. We spoke for several minutes about schedules and upcoming tutoring sessions. Normal conversation. Familiar conversation. The kind I suddenly realized I missed. When the call ended, I found Kenji standing nearby. "You should return home tomorrow," he said. The statement surprised me. "You are sending me away?" A faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "No. I am respecting your life." I looked down at my phone. He was right. Students were waiting for me. Bills still existed. Responsibilities had not disappeared simply because I had discovered an extraordinary secret. "Haruto will be disappointed," I admitted. Kenji's gaze shifted toward the hallway where his son was talking with nurses. "Yes." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he added quietly, "So will I." The honesty caught me completely off guard. Before I could respond, footsteps echoed behind us. Haruto appeared carrying the finished airplane model. "Look what we built," he said proudly. Then his smile faded when he noticed our expressions. "What happened?" I knelt beside him. "I have to go back to Chicago tomorrow." The airplane lowered slightly in his hands. For a second, disappointment filled his eyes. Then he asked the question neither of us expected. "If you leave tomorrow, when are you coming back?" Haruto's question stayed with me long after he asked it. When are you coming back? Children had a way of cutting through complicated emotions and finding the truth hiding underneath. The truth was that I did not know. 24 hours earlier, I had not even known this boy existed. Now the thought of leaving felt strangely difficult. That evening, the 3 of us shared dinner in a private dining room overlooking the city. The meal was simple. Soup, fresh bread, grilled vegetables. Nothing extravagant. Yet it felt more meaningful than dinners I had attended in far more impressive places. Haruto talked almost the entire time. He told stories about books he loved. He described a science project he wanted to build. He even tried convincing me that pineapple belonged on pizza. I informed him he was completely wrong. His laughter filled the room. Every time he laughed, I noticed nurses smiling as they passed by the doorway. It was as if the entire floor had become brighter. At one point, Haruto excused himself to speak with his physician. The moment he disappeared down the hallway, silence settled over the table. Kenji sat across from me, his hands folded calmly in front of him. The city lights reflected in the windows behind him. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then he surprised me. "You changed him." I shook my head. "I did not do anything." "That is not true." His voice remained calm. "Certain. For months he has spoken about the future as if it was a distant possibility. Since meeting you, he speaks about it as if it is guaranteed." I looked down at my glass. I was not sure how to respond to that. Finally I said the only honest thing I could think of. "He changed me too." Something softened in Kenji's expression. Not much. Just enough to reveal the father beneath the businessman. I suspected he might. The conversation ended there, but the feeling remained. Later that night, I returned to the guest suite the foundation had arranged for me. Sleep should have come easily. It did not. My mind replayed every moment of the past few days. The donation center. Dr. Sullivan. Haruto's smile. Kenji's gratitude. The impossible connection tying everything together. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a message. It was a photograph. Haruto stood beside the model airplane we had built together. Beneath the picture was a short note. Thank you for today. I smiled despite myself. Then another message appeared. This one from an unknown number. Take care on your flight tomorrow. Thank you for giving my son hope. There was no signature. There did not need to be one. I knew exactly who had sent it. The next morning arrived too quickly. My suitcase stood packed beside the door. The car to the airport would arrive within an hour. Yet as I looked out the window at the rising sun, I realized something important. I had arrived believing I was meeting strangers. I was leaving knowing that somehow, against all logic, they no longer felt like strangers at all. The drive to the airport should have felt like an ending. Instead, it felt like the beginning of something none of us fully understood yet. Morning sunlight spilled across the city as the sedan moved through quiet streets. I sat in the back seat holding my phone, staring at the photograph Haruto had sent the night before. Every few minutes I found myself smiling without realizing it. By the time we arrived at the private terminal, I had almost convinced myself the previous week had been a dream. Then I stepped out of the car and saw them waiting. Haruto stood beside Kenji near the entrance. The sight stopped me cold. You did not have to come all the way here, I said as I approached. Haruto shrugged. I wanted to. Then he wrapped his arms around me before I could say anything else. I hugged him back. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Sometimes words only get in the way. When he finally stepped back, he held out a small box. For you. I opened it carefully. Inside was a simple silver keychain shaped like an airplane. The same airplane we had built together. My throat tightened instantly. Haruto. He looked nervous now. So you do not forget. I swallowed hard. I could never forget. His smile returned. The kind that reached his eyes. The kind that made everyone around him smile too. A boarding announcement echoed through the terminal. Reality was arriving whether we liked it or not. I looked toward Kenji. He had remained quiet the entire time, giving us space. Thank you, I said, for letting me meet him. Kenji studied me for several seconds. Then he shook his head slightly. No. His voice was calm. Steady. Thank you for meeting us. The words settled heavily between us. Because we both understood the truth now. None of this had started with invitations or flights or hospitals. It had started years earlier with a decision made by someone who expected nothing in return. Another boarding announcement sounded overhead. Haruto glanced toward the gate and sighed dramatically. I guess this is goodbye. No, I said immediately. This is not goodbye. He looked hopeful. Promise. I smiled. Promise. For a second, the little boy seemed satisfied. Then he did something neither Kenji nor I expected. He stepped between us and grabbed one of my hands and one of his father's. Good, he said. Because families are supposed to stay in touch. Silence followed. Not awkward silence. Emotional silence. The kind that arrives when a simple truth lands harder than anyone expected. I looked at Kenji. He looked back at me. Neither of us corrected Haruto. Neither of us could. Finally, Kenji lowered his gaze toward his son and exhaled softly. The smallest smile appeared on his face. You saved my son first, he said quietly. His eyes lifted to meet mine again. Then you saved me. I stood there holding the airplane keychain while sunlight poured through the terminal windows around us. A week earlier, I had believed my monthly donations disappeared into a system I would never see. Now I understood something very different. Kindness never disappears. Sometimes it travels farther than we can imagine. Sometimes it becomes hope. Sometimes it becomes family. And sometimes years later it comes back to find you when you least expect it.